Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a world where faith is basically a currency, miracles are seemingly for sale, and preachers are wealthier than you can possibly imagine. We are talking about the prosperity gospel, a really controversial theology that has built an absolute empire on the promise of divine riches.
And it all kind of kicks off with this now infamous interview. When televangelist Kenneth Copeland was confronted about why he needs a private jet, his answer was, well, it wasn't what anyone expected. He said he couldn't fly commercial because, and I quote, he didn't want to get into a tube with a bunch of demons.
And that one completely bizarre statement, it just blows the doors wide open on a world that is, frankly, hard to believe. A world where preachers have raked in fortunes in the hundreds of millions, owning whole fleets of jets, sprawling mansions, and in Copeland's case, he even has his own private airport. The question is, how is any of this real?
To really get how this whole empire was built, we've got to look at the stage where these preachers perform. And let me tell you, it's a stage unlike any other.
Yeah, just forget your local community church. These are mega churches, and they are massive operations. They feel way more like a rock concert than a religious service. I'm talking professional lighting, concert-level sound systems, and when the preacher finally hits the stage, the crowd just erupts like a rock star walked out. And that's all before you even get to the TV broadcasts, which reach millions and millions more.
And right at the heart of this world, you've got a few key players. Each one is a celebrity in their own right, and each one is known for their immense personal wealth just as much as for their huge followings. From Kenneth Copeland's fleet of jets to Creflo Dollar's 2 Rolls-Royces, extravagance isn't just a side effect, it's pretty much the central theme. So how in the world do they justify this level of opulence? I mean, in a faith that has traditionally valued things like modesty and warned against the love of money, how do you explain the private jets and the mansions?
Well, the answer is in this radical, and I mean radical, reinterpretation of Scripture, a theology that's known as the prosperity gospel. And at its core, it's a really simple but revolutionary idea. It reframes key religious figures, like Jesus, not as humble and poor, but as powerful and, yes, wealthy.
So here's the absolute key takeaway. In this belief system, wealth isn't seen as a sin, it's not a distraction from your faith. No, it's presented as your divine right, and it's tangible proof that your faith is strong.
And this teaching goes even further. It suggests that followers were made in the image of God, and because of that, they have a little bit of divinity inside themselves. This allows them, through faith, to literally speak their desires into existence, to manifest the prosperity they've been promised.
Okay, so if faith can manifest wealth, how does that actually translate into a practical, day-to-day financial system? Well, the answer is a very powerful and, honestly, a very effective mechanism.
Now, what's so kind of brilliant about the system is how it completely reframes the act of giving money. It's not just a simple donation anymore, it's a spiritual investment. You sow a seed, which is just a fancy way of saying you give money, and in return, you're promised a harvest, a divine financial blessing that's going to be way, way bigger than what you gave.
And get this, it gets even more specific. Preachers will often ask for these really specific seed amounts. Not a round number, but something odd, like $1,144. This specific number, it creates this powerful illusion that there's a direct link between that exact amount and a specific miracle or breakthrough that you need.
And believe it or not, this system is incredibly effective. It's used to fund everything from the ministry's day-to-day operations to, the very same private jets that cause so much controversy. As Creflo Dollar literally told his cheering congregation, their donations were their act of faith to help him get his $65 million plane.
And this right here, this perfectly illustrates the core genius and the core deception of the prosperity gospel. The wealth isn't a flaw in the system, it's the ultimate marketing tool. The preachers' fancy cars, their huge mansions, their private jets, all of it is held up as proof that their teachings work. They're basically saying, look at me, this could be you too.
But the promises of the prosperity gospel go way beyond just material wealth. They escalate into a much more dramatic and frankly ethically fraught territory, the world of faith healing. Preachers like Benny Hinn are the absolute masters of this world. They fill entire stadiums for what they call miracle crusades. And on a giant stage in front of thousands of desperate people, they claim to heal blindness, cure cancer, and reverse paralysis with nothing more than the touch of a hand. But what's actually going on behind the scenes?
Well, the most damning testimony comes from a total insider, Benny Hinn's own nephew, Costi. He eventually came forward and described a very carefully constructed illusion. He said their job was to look blessed, to convince other people that if they gave money, God would bless them too.
And sure enough, investigations have revealed the tricks of the trade. Behind the scenes, there are screeners whose job it is to intersect people with really severe visible illnesses before they can ever get to the stage. Other so-called miracles, like making one leg seem to grow longer, are nothing more than old-fashioned magicians' tricks that just rely on simple misdirection.
And the consequences of these broken promises, they can be absolutely devastating. An HBO special documented the heartbreaking story of Ashanel, a 10-year-old boy with 2 massive brain tumors. His parents, desperate, brought him to Benny Hinn, who laid his hands on the boy and told them to expect a miracle. They kept donating money, holding on to that hope. 7 weeks later, Ashanel died.
So if the miracles are a mix of trickery and really carefully managed optics, what are people actually experiencing in those auditoriums? What is it that feels so real to so many people?
Well, experts point to what is basically a perfect storm of psychological factors. The high-energy atmosphere, with the soaring music and the dramatic lights, it creates this highly suggestible, almost trance-like state. Then you've got this immense social pressure to conform. When everyone around you is having this profound experience, you're much more likely to believe you are too. And finally, there's the very well-documented placebo effect. If you believe with all your heart that you will be healed, your brain can actually trigger temporary physiological changes that feel like healing.
But maybe the most tragic and honestly the most insidious part of this whole system is what happens when the healing inevitably fails. Believers are taught to blame not the preacher, but their own lack of faith, or maybe even a generational curse. After his son died, Othniel's father was just left to wonder if maybe he had somehow failed in the eyes of God.
You know, despite a growing chorus of criticism from watchdog groups and even other Christian leaders, the message of the prosperity gospel is just so incredibly seductive. It promises health, wealth, and happiness, and that is a powerful and appealing combo. This creates a self-perpetuating cycle that is very, very difficult to break. And now, this uniquely American export is being sold to the rest of the world. Ultimately, the sources we've looked at suggest that the only real challenge to this world doesn't come from the outside. It comes from believers themselves, having the courage to ask this one simple but incredibly powerful question.